Welcome to the Legacy All-Stars podcast, where we talk to inspirational people making a difference in the lives of others. I'm your host, Alan Pavlosky. Today we are speaking with David Parsons III, who has dedicated his life making a difference in the lives of others. He is a recording artist, an entrepreneur, a father, and an amazing friend to anyone who is fortunate enough to know him. Just full transparency, I've known David for 20 years. We worked together in my sports business where David was an instrumental part of my organization, and he and I have maintained a close friendship over the years. So I'm really proud to have him on the show. Let's get right to it and start our conversation with David. David, my man.
Yeah.
So good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. Aloha.
I'm going to ask you the first question. Can you share a bit about your background and what inspired you to pursue the path of making music?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I moved to the island of Kauai in the Hawaiian chain in 2013, and I actually didn't know I could sing at that point in my life. I had spent about 8 years starting a marketing agency out of Los Angeles, California, and I worked with Alan, working with professional athletes and entertainers, building their personal websites, and gained a lot of knowledge on personal branding, and I had started that career early in my professional life in college, so I didn't have much of a life in college. I was carrying 2 cell phones, a business and a personal one, to class, and I was the only one that was dressed up in full business attire every day and getting to travel with Alan to different places in the U.S. And then when Alan and I stopped working, I continued that business. And so I arrived to the shores of Kauai with a very entrepreneurial spirit, but purposely moved to an island in the middle of the Pacific to live the life I felt like I didn't get to have, both growing up, but specifically in college. I wanted to move here, hit the reset button, be a server, learn how to surf, just do life in the slow lane, for a little bit to figure out what I really wanted to do, because I loved marketing, but I knew there was something else out there. And so when I moved here, I actually had my guitar. I knew three chords, and I had no idea that I had this potential within me. And so really, as I started surfing, and my landlord, who got me introduced to surfing, kept asking me, why don't you come play music with me? So finally, we started doing that 2 or 3 times a week. And he just, for about 6 months, he's like, you got to sing. I'm like, Mitch, I don't sing. I'll just play with you. And then I had some stuff happen in my family. And one night I came home from work. I was really pissed off. And he's like, just sing from where your heart is. And I was ticked that we were singing a Johnny Cash song. And so I just started singing as loud as I could and as pissed off as I was. And that honestly was the start of my music career. And, right there at this little house that was up a canyon on an island in the middle of the Pacific. And now I support my family full time writing music and recording and gigging. I do over 350 shows a year. And, before kids, I was traveling off island twice a month. I still travel off island, but not quite as much. And, I pinch myself. I'm living the dream, playing music, and built a recording studio on the island. That's the premier recording studio here. And, it's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing.
Fantastic. Other than, you've already probably answered most of this question, but was there a pivotal moment or experience other than that experience with your landlord that motivated you to start the work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's 2. The first one that really kind of made me go all in, which is really ironic. Mitch and I always tell the story. He plays with me. He plays ukulele, so he plays on a lot of the stage tour stuff that we do together. But I think my kickoff moment in my musical career as a profession, I'm a very all-in kind of guy. If I figure out something that I love to do, I try to. There's no real gray space. I just put everything I have into it. And after playing with Mitch at his house for 2-3 years, he had people that would come from all over the world staying at our place. And we started playing music for the guests, and people started asking us, do you have a CD? And I just would crack up. I'm like, do we have a CD? We don't have a CD. We're just two dudes that love to play music. But with my marketing background, right, it was like, hey, if some stranger is asking you and is willing to give you $25 for a CD right there on the spot, then maybe you have a product that's worth selling. And so after about a year of this, just playing at his house 2 or 3 times a week, and getting asked multiple times a week, hey, where can we hear your music? I decided to, one night I was working, I work 7 days a week, 6 days a week. I was working double shifts as a server at the time, and as a back, a busboy, a dishwasher kind of tasks. And I said, you know what? I got Friday off. There's a art walk down the street from where I was living, and they were allowing musicians to come set up underneath it was at night, and so they would allow musicians to basically set up and play their music under the streetlights. And so it was my first Friday off in probably 2 years since I had moved to the island, and I decided I was going to take my guitar, I was going to go down there, and I knew 3 songs by heart at that point. So I went down as far down as I could where there was no lights, and I opened up my guitar case as a little tip jar, because that's what everybody was doing, and I closed my eyes because I was so nervous. There was hundreds of people walking through this outdoor, Friday night under the lights art shop extravaganza that they do every Friday on this street downtown. So I'm down there and I start playing, and I got my eyes closed, and when I open my eyes up after the 3rd song, I look around and there's about 10 or 15 people standing around, and there's $43 in my guitar case. And I was so excited, I said, okay, I'm doing this as a career, right? And that same night, as I was on this total high, my brother and I, anytime something big happens in our business or in our life, we always call each other and we go and we buy these little ice cream packs as a celebration. So I went into the store, the local grocery mart, that night after I packed up from the little farmer's market, street fair. And I went in, I called my brother, I said, you're never going to believe what happened. I just made $43 in less than an hour playing music. I'm going to do this full time as a career. And he starts laughing, and we open up the ice cream, and I'm walking out the grocery store door, and I look across the street, and there's a steakhouse. And my marketing and sales background kicks in and goes, why don't you go ask them if they have live music? So I walked right across the street, same night as that street fair. I walked in. I said, hey, do you guys have a manager here? And they said, yeah. I said, you guys ever have live music? I'm a musician. Would you be interested in that? And the lady at the counter goes, wait, did somebody call you about that today? I said, no, I was just curious. She says, we were just in a manager's meeting and they wanted to start live music. She goes, we would love to have you come play. So the manager walks out. Her name is Marissa. And she goes, yeah, we'd love to have you play. Can you start this week? I said, sure. She goes, can you fill a 2-hour time gap? I know 3 songs. I said, yeah, sure, I could fill. She goes, what do you charge? I go, $100 an hour. She goes, $200. I said, yeah. She goes, great. I go, really? She's like, yep. So that was the about a year after I started singing, and then the next week was just absolute hell. I had to learn 2 hours worth of music, and for the next year, I that's what I did. I just went into every single restaurant and hotel that I could find on island, and I said, same thing. Just you got it space for another person to play music, whether they had it or didn't have it. And so that was a real pivotal point in my life. And that was the start of my music as a career that pays income. And then I said there's 2 stories. And I think the other one, which is more serendipitous, is, and it's a little darker, but it's such a beautiful part of my journey, is I struggled a lot. And Alan and I have known each other for 20 years, and I don't even know if you know this, but I struggled a lot in college, my second year, and I actually had a point where I was in a really dark place, and I was going to commit suicide, and I was sitting at the train station in West Covina, California, and at this little train stop, dirt parking lot. And I had my suicide note in hand, and I was ready to I knew when the train was coming, and And I just said, a little prayer, and I just said, hey, if I'm still supposed to be here, please, my faith plays a big role. And I said, just please, God, help me to have some courage in this moment. And this song came on, Pandora, random song comes on, and the song, there's lyrics in the song that says, no one loves me like you do. No one loves me the way that you do. And it gave me just enough hope that things were I had a really rough childhood growing up, and I think that's important to know for my viewers, because when I sing, I try to sing with all the emotion that I have, whether I'm playing original music or cover song music or, for a wedding or whatever it might be. I try to go back to those places in my life where I had an emotional response to something happening, and I try to really sing and write music from that place. And so that song in my life in that moment gave me enough courage to call somebody else in my life to come get me and to take me to the ER, Baldwin Park, Kaiser. And that started a really long healing process for some really difficult things in my childhood, some real trauma, not pity trauma, but real trauma that I dealt with as a kid. And why I tell that story is because there's a full circle to it. And this music as a career has really been a thread of my journey longer than, even before I knew that I could sing, even before I knew I could write music. And what happened is about 3 or 4 years later, I was sitting in my office and I get a message on Facebook from a good friend that knew the impact of that specific song in my life. It's Jars of Clay, No One Loves Me Like You. And he said, hey, Jars of Clay is playing a private concert at our college, and I think you should go to it. And so I went that night, packed everything up really quickly, got in my car, went down to the school that was a couple miles away from my office. I hadn't been attending, I had graduated already, but I went on campus, and I was standing at the back, and because of my work with celebrity athletes, and at the time, somehow somebody at the back of the concert, just sitting in the pews, approached me and said, hey, are you David? I said, yeah. He said, I know about your story working with celebrity nonprofits. Can I ask you a couple questions about how you run 501c3s? I said, yes. And I answered his questions. And at the end, he said, I'm actually the band manager for Jars of Clay, and I run their nonprofit foundation, and we're just starting it up. And so I wanted to ask you how you get these things done. Mike Linda is his name. And I said, Mike, I got to tell you about why I'm here. And I proceeded to tell him how this song that they wrote changed my life, because I wouldn't be standing here. And at the end of the concert, he takes me by the hand, he walks me down backstage, and he introduces me to the guy that wrote the song that saved my life at the train station. And I got to tell him face to face, thank you for writing this song, because of your endurance in bringing this to market and to recording it and writing the lyrics. And I'm standing in front of you today alive because of that song. Wow. And here I am. That's before I knew I could play guitar. That's before I knew I could sing, right? And then we fast forward, that was 2010. And fast forward in 2013, 14 is when I first started playing my first couple chords and writing music. So I tell those two stories because those are the kickoff points in my career as a musician. And I'm certainly not an Ed Sheeran or an Elvis or anything like that. I just am trying to make a difference in my little sphere of people in my life through my craft and just trying to get better. So I would say those are the two pivotal points.
Man, I mean, and I obviously knew you back then, but at the time we hadn't really been talking to each other for probably a year or so at that point.
Yeah.
And you did fill me in on that later on, and I was shocked. I was like, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you let me help you? And I was kind of pissed off at you, actually. But I'm glad you're still here, and it's everybody else benefits by you still being here. So I really appreciate that story.
I'm certainly glad I'm still here too. And I think it's just when you get in a spot like that, you're not chemically in the right spot, like mentally. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter what people say, or you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about the pain that for me, it was the pain that had accumulated over so many years of dealing with some real personal stuff in our family. That just kind of came to a T. So, but I do appreciate you being willing to be there for me. So absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's go on to the next question. It's tough to follow that one because that's such a high impact moment in your life, and it's hard to beat that as an impact. But how would you describe the mission that drives you every day?
I was very blessed to always find myself on teams that performed at very high levels, and I wasn't necessarily the leader in all of those teams, but I was around really good leaders on those teams. In high school, I was on a constitutional debate team. I actually was the team captain on that, but we extremely rigorous competitional debate team that centered around law and the Constitution and stuff, and got to perform on the House floor. And then in college, I found, I was a bench warmer. I always joke I played left bench, but I got to be on this team and I was a walk-on, and made my way onto the team. I was one of 72 guys that tried out, and I was the only guy that actually didn't redshirt of the 3 guys that made the team from the tryouts. Not on scholarship.
This is baseball, of course. Nobody knows that, but we are talking about baseball.
At Azusa Pacific, I got to play on a baseball team there, and that was a World Series team. We got to participate in the World Series. We crushed every record that was in the NCAA Division II. It was NAIA Division I at the time. But so I found myself on really well-performing teams, whether as a leader or as a spectator on the team. And one thing that I've learned about that is to have a process and to trust the process. That was something my coach in college always used to say, baseball coach, trust the process. If you commit yourself to excellence 100% as often as you practice, trust that process will produce results. And so I think I've really tried to do that in my life, and another mantra I've always had is leave it all on the field. Give it everything that you've got, right? Playing music, I play music 6 nights a week. Often I have 2 or 3 gigs a day. And it can be very easy to feel, sometimes I do the same songs, right, over and over again. And it can be very easy to get in a rut of complacency or not to, and I just try to remember that is I got to leave it all on the stage. I got to leave it all on the field. I got to give every lyric that I have the best of me and come from that place, because that's what music's about. It's about coming from a place that really connects with other people, and you can only do that if you're authentic in it, and people can feel it or they don't feel it, and they either connect or they don't connect. It's pretty instant. You can tell.
Yeah, for sure.
So that definitely is something that drives me every day. That mantra.
What are some of the biggest challenges you faced along the way? I mean, you talked about some of your personal challenges, but what are those challenges that you faced in the music career, and how did you overcome them?
Sure. So I started doing music full-time around 2016, where I have other businesses, but if I were to stop those other businesses, music would have supported me. And then I got married in 2020. So I think the biggest challenge of the last 5 years, like many people, was COVID. And so I have another business that I run in April 2020, living on a small island with a small economy that's based on tourism. In 2 weeks, in the second week of April, I lost 263 accounts with that other business, which is a service industry business. It's a window cleaning and power washing company. We lost 263 accounts. Mm-hmm. And then over the course of the next 3 months, I lost over 250 or so music gigs that got canceled both on island and off island. And I ended up finding myself sleeping on, I don't even know if you know this, Alan, but I was pretty much homeless. So I was sleeping on the floor of a spec house of a friend. And because I was 100% supported on my own through my businesses, and the businesses completely dried up, and I was the owner, I got no PPE. I didn't get any of that. I got one small $7,500 handout that I think over 90,000 businesses in the state of Hawaii applied for, and only 1,000 got. But that was it. And so that was a huge challenge, trying to pivot and not having any unemployment and not knowing what to do. And then just realizing, like, no handouts. I had to figure this out. And it was actually during that time that I really discovered, like, I'd been dating my wife for about a year and a half, and it was like her being there with me, being willing to sleep on the ground in a construction home by my side and not giving up on me. It was like, okay, this is the girl that I know I want to be with through when the shit hits the fan. Mm-hmm. And so that was hard. Coming back from that was really difficult. But yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to take a break real quick and listen to one of David's songs. But before we play it, it's called Top Down. Before we play it, I want David to explain the significance of this song and some of the thought that goes into it.
Yeah. So Top Down, I wrote during COVID, during this experience that I just talked about. And the second verse just says, I really wrote it as a mantra for myself. And it says, never give up, never lose hope, never lose sight of the dreams that you sow. Lean on love. Sometimes you have to let some go. Sometimes you have breakups. Sometimes you have things that you love to do that don't pan out the way that you had hoped or dreamed or wished. And it's about being okay with that and trying new things. And that's what the chorus talks about. It's I wrote it envisioning myself in the thick of when the crap hit the fan, just enjoying the island life of driving at sunset with the windows open, or, imagining a convertible top down, just feeling the wind and the freedom and the liberty of that moment, and just driving from kind of surf spot to surf spot, jumping in the water, and that feeling of freedom of letting, like, all the kind of cares and the troubles go. So that's where I wrote this. And there's this really cool story about kind of the reckoning of that experience, and then writing the song, and then this song getting picked up by a whole bunch of, ABC7 played it, and radios stations across Hawaii started playing it, and California started playing it. And again, I think it just goes back to, you have to write from that point as a musician or an artist. Like, you have to write from that point of vulnerability, because that's when you really connect with people. So that's what the song's about.
All right. This is Top Down from David Parsons III.
Well, I sing top down, look around, go stop. Never gonna know if you'd never try, baby. Top down, look around, go stop. Never gonna know if you never fly, baby. Higher, you got to fly higher. I got the sunshine.
You can hear the rest of that song on all the streaming platforms. Just look for David Parsons III. Let's get on to the next question, David. What has been your proudest achievement or milestone so far?
I think I just came to terms with this like a week or two ago. It's been a really challenging year, losing my grandpa, and he was he was the only entrepreneur and businessman in my family, and just really looking up to him. And he loved Maui and loved the islands, and it was always his dream to move to Maui. He bought a place there, but never actually made the full-time jump. He got lung cancer and stuff, and it's just been a tough year with, like, losing him. And we had our second child, and she's awesome, but 2 kids under 2 is a lot of work. And then I got COVID and mono, and I had mono for 3. Alan, you and I talked a bunch of times in the middle of that. You were super helpful getting my brain wrapped around how to approach being a father and a businessman, and taking care of myself at the same time, and finding a healthy balance with all that, which I really appreciate. But I think this year has just been really challenging, and I've done a lot of pondering on, like, what am I proud of? Like, what's my legacy right now? And I think now that the storm of this year is kind of settled and passed, and I've really thought a lot about, like, what's important to me and what my goals are moving forward. And I just feel like the thing that I'm most proud about is sitting in the front yard at sunset on my one night off and looking at my girls in the front yard with smiles on their face, and my wife in a place of contentment, and us being at a place of peace, and knowing as a man, like, I dealt with a lot of shit this year, and I only missed 3 gigs the whole year, despite having, you know, crazy fevers. And this is because my wife's a stay-at-home mom. That's what we always wanted. It's what we wanted for the kids, as long as she was willing and desiring to do that. So I think what I'm most proud about is I get to live in paradise on the island, where a lot of people have had to move off because of inflation. And we have a place to call home. We still rent, but we have a place to call home. We got money in our savings account. And I know I've worked really hard, and my wife has worked really hard for us to be in that place. And when we felt like quitting or giving up, like, we found a way to lean on each other, and we found a way to lean into it, to lean into the grind, and to be okay with the suck. And I think that's what I'm most proud of, like, is I'm playing music for a living. And yeah, I play a lot of cover songs, and a lot of musicians and artists don't want to do that. I don't care, because my family gets to live here, and I get to play music.
Yeah, and you get to mix in your own material, and
yeah, totally
get that exposure. I mean, missing 3 gigs during all that, man, that's playing hurt right there.
Yeah, might not have been the smartest part, which what we talked about. I think I
maybe not
let go.
But it's tough. You definitely displayed toughness.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's a good word. I think just realizing to do what you love and to make a real difference, you have to be mentally tough, and you got to be tried through fire, and not all people can do that. And I'm not trying to say that, like, to sound better than other people, but to know in my heart that I've risen to the challenge, rose to the challenge. Absolutely. Of that when I need to, on behalf of my family, not for myself. I mean, specifically, like, for my girls and my wife to feel secure and to feel provided for. Yeah. And that's what I'm most proud of.
Most definitely. How has your work impacted the lives of others? Can you share a story that stands out to you about that?
Yeah. This kind of ties into one of the earlier questions that you had posed before, which have there been, like, pivotal moments in your career? And I certainly, playing music, I've had some really cool moments, like, you know, playing for a fireworks shows at different military bases, and looking out and seeing, you know, 10,000 military personnel that are protecting the nation and putting their lives on the line, and seeing their families, and being able to play for those kind of experiences. And that's great. But I think for me, it's like these little micro moments when I'm playing music. Some are, like, to the benefit of other people, and then some are, like, of my own benefit. And I think one of those ones that really stands out is on island, there's only one road that goes around the whole island, right? It's just one highway, and it's a 2-lane road, so there's traffic going both ways.
Yeah, been there. I love that about Kauai.
Yeah, and when I first moved here, there's like 3 stoplights on the whole island. There's 80,000 people on, I think, 62,000 when I first moved here, 62,000 homes or something like that. But what I'm getting at is there's a lot of accidents, and unfortunately, a lot of those accidents, because they're head on, are you know, people that pass away. And so one of those things in my music career that has always been an honor is being invited into people's personal lives when they have a memorial service or a funeral, and being invited as a stranger into that space, and finding like empathy within myself to be able to bring the best of my singing, but also being very conscious of, like, where they're at in the place of tenderness. And so I think like one of the moments that I've had where I felt like my work had most impacted somebody else's life is I had a family who asked me, he was 18 years old and he unfortunately died in a car accident on island. And the family asked me to come play for the service and then for the reception after. And the mother couldn't bring herself to talk to me personally, which is totally understandable when we were talking about logistics for the funeral and stuff. And so one of the next of kin asked me to play a specific song requested by the mother. And it was a really hard song. I had never played it before, ended up learning how to play it. And they asked me to play it at a time where the eyes were not really on me, and not that it ever should have been on me because the funeral was obviously not about me or anything, but I wasn't like on stage is what I'm trying to say. I was just background music at that point. And I started playing the song. I mean, can I get emotional just thinking about it? But like, I started playing the song and everybody was still eating. It was during the reception time. And I look over at the mother who I didn't know, and she looks at me just with tears in her eyes. And it was just like this moment that I shared with her from across the room. And she just like mouthed thank you to me. And I later came to find out that the night before he passed away, that was the song that him and the mother listened to together. And then he obviously suddenly and unexpectedly passed away the next night.
Wow. And
so, I feel like as a musician, so much has changed in what my goals and desires have been. I think like a lot of young artists starting out, I want to be on stage at Red Rocks, or, I want to be, at the Boston Coliseum. And sure, like those are cool. I would love to have those experiences, and maybe those will happen one day. But I think something I learned about sitting the bench in baseball in college, and when I realized like that wasn't my career path, as much as I had wanted to be a professional baseball player for 18, 20 years of my life. I remember getting the winning hit against a team, and it was one of my only at-bats in game. And I remember sitting there thinking after that, like I had worked so hard to get this chance to be in the game, actually live in a game. And I did it, and I hit it, and I, drove the run in that won the game, but it didn't strike all the chords from my heart. And I knew I could let go of baseball at that time, and that there was something else out there. And then here I am, like years later, playing music at a reception, and I have this human connection with somebody that I never saw again during a funeral. And that hit every heart fulfillment that I had ever desired in a career. And, so I guess like what I'm saying is like, sometimes making a difference isn't what you originally plan or think is going to be the ultimate impact. And it might not be on some massive scale that you had originally planned for, as a college student. But you realize like if you're just faithful to the process and you're faithful to doing every day, getting up and doing it again and getting a little bit better the next time that you do it, you have these moments of huge impact in people's lives. I think the other big one, which is was more of like a slap in the back of the head for me, was like, wow, I had, with my other business, sometimes I have to work most weeks, most days I work double shifts. So I'll actually run the power washing crew on site in the hazmat suits with the team from 5 o'clock in the morning till 4 or 5 or 6, go home, change, tell my kids I love them, and then get back on stage. And there's a lot of times where I don't feel like getting on stage. I don't feel like finding that deep place to sing from. And, I had one time, it was just a Tuesday night at a restaurant hotel. And I was up there and I just was giving it everything I had. And it had been a long day in the sun, in the hazmat suit, 2 stories up, power washing. And I finished and I'm like, well, that was a disaster because I don't have any energy to give to the music. And I had this couple come up to me who was sitting in the back for the entire 2-hour set. And he said, hey, I just wanted to say that your music really meant so much to us this evening. We really were moved by your music. And he said, we wanted to personally say thank you, but we also wanted you to know before you see your Venmo tip that we did not make a mistake on the Venmo tip. It is what it is. And I said, okay, so I get home and it was $1,000 tip for singing. And I was like beside myself, like, are you and I even called him after. It was like, text him after because I got his number. And I just said, are you sure you didn't add a zero there on accident? Because I've gotten a couple $100 tips over the years. But to see $1,000 tips for singing, I think that was another moment where it just was like, people don't put their money, hard-earned money on the line unless they feel moved to do so. And I think that was very affirming. Not that I ever needed that, but it was very unexpected, very, very gracious of them, and very affirming to me to keep doing, like, keep doing what you're doing, in other words. And the musician life is a grind, man. It's no joke. It's definitely cutthroat. And it was just one of those moments of like, wow, okay, I'm gonna keep working at this.
Yeah. We're going to take a break and play. With that in mind, there's a song that was inspired by challenges and got you a lot of exposure. Actually, got a lot of airplay, and that's called "Life Is Jelly." And I'm going to ask you to just tell about the significance of that song before we break to it.
Yeah. So "Life Is Jelly." The lyrics weren't necessarily, whereas "Top Down" is very lyrically message driven and hopeful driven and came out of a place of hardship. "Life Is Jelly" has lyrically, it's just a love song, it's a fun, whimsical love song, but it's actually one of the songs that's been most well received from me. And I wrote the song when my car broke down on the side of the road, and on the island, there's like no tow truck service that comes within 45 minutes. It's always like 6 to 8 hours later, right? So I ended up writing the song without a guitar, and then on the ride home, asked the tow truck driver to drop me off on the one music spot guitar store. And I went in there and figured the chords out for it really quickly and recorded it on my phone. Well, fast forward, it ends up getting played across the islands on a couple of larger radio stations. And then I've heard it through my streaming platform. I've seen that it's actually got radio spins in a bunch of different states across the West Coast. So it was really cool because I ended up getting a phone call from John Mayers, former artist of repertoire for A&M Records. And he had heard the song on radio and somehow found my number and personally called me and asked me like what I was doing in music, and wow, this is a really well written song, and can I help you along, or how can I help you? And it was just like this crazy, kind of step. And then my favorite story about the "Life Is Jelly" song is in 2019, I think it was, I started talking with a girl that was in Australia. And after talking with her for a couple months, I just said, hey, I'd like to meet you in person. Let's see if there's still chemistry when we're in person. And so I flew down to Australia from Hawaii and met with her. And on day 2, she's like, there's no spark for me. This relationship isn't going to continue. So I was like, I spent like $3,000, right? $4,000 to get down there for a week. She canceled all the plans that she had I was supposed to have dinner with her parents because I had met them a couple times through FaceTime, and all that got canceled. So I'm now in Australia with no plans, no chauffeur, like nothing, So I'm feeling pretty down. And the one super touristy thing that I wanted to do while I was in Australia was I really wanted to climb the Sydney Bridge because I saw people doing that when I first was flying over the Sydney Bridge. I was like, that was so cool. And so on the last day that I was there, I get to the Sydney Bridge. I'm checking in, and there's this whole check-in process because they got to gear you up to hike to the top of the bridge, and you got to lock in and wear all these harnesses and stuff. And I'm checked in, and this huge 3-story building and this gift shop and everything, and I hear "Life Is Jelly" come on, and wow. I think it's in my pocket. So I pull my phone out of my pocket. And I thought maybe it got started playing somehow on Spotify or something. And I looked down at my phone. There's nothing playing. And I realize it's my song being played on radio in Sydney in a different country. And I had this still little voice that just said, because I was really pondering, like, should I continue making music? Because it's really hard to do to get a break or whatever. And I just had this quiet voice, like, continue the path that you're on, continue to make music. And it was just like this crazy moment of hearing my original song that I wrote and recorded, waiting for a tow truck. It's now playing on a different, like, in a different country.
That's amazing.
It was pretty wild. So that was a really cool, like, that's the, you know, and again, it's just a fun song, but yeah, kind of cool
right,
how those little.
Let's hear "Life Is Jelly" by David Parsons III.
I don't wanna see you lately, 'cause you really drive me crazy, baby. Buttercup, you're beautiful through. All these words are tangled up, so wingman, come and wish me luck. Then gentlemen, it's time to bid you adieu. I said, hey, that's quite the look you're giving to me. Hey, caught you peeking my way. You got me tongue twisted, little painted butterflies are coming, babe. Think I'm being silly, it's true. 'Cause my palms are sweaty, hot's confetti, limbs are feeling like spaghetti. Life is pretty jelly with you. So simmer down and take a seat, darling, listen up to me.
So Dave, thank you. I mean, the songs are so, and yes, it's whimsical, but they have a calmness and a zen quality to them. So I really like that about your music.
I think that's the island. You know, it's funny because I'm looking at the question that you posed about giving up, and something that just occurred to me about that. That was my first ever radio song that hit radio. Mm-hmm. And when I had been working on it in the studio for about 4 months after I wrote the song, trying to get it tweaked. And I was so excited because I got an opportunity to meet one of the top DJs that's on the islands. And I presented to him, and he got back to me about 2-3 days later, and he said, hey, cool song, but it needs this, this, and that. And he said, we're not going to play it on the radio. And I said, okay, can I talk to you on the phone for just a couple minutes so that you can elaborate to me what this song is missing? So he gave me a checklist of things, and it cost me about $1,000 to come back and have those things added to it, parts and electric guitar and remastered and all this stuff, right? And about 7-8 months later, I saw him walking into a conference, the same guy I hadn't talked to, and I had literally the day before gotten the updated version after about 5 or 6 months of saving and working and then putting more money toward fixing the song. And he stops and he comes up to me and he goes, David, didn't you share the song with me before? I said, yeah. He said, it's done. It has all the parts he said, it's got all the parts that I had asked for. I said, yeah, I really took to heart what you had said, and I went back to the drawing board and I fixed it. And he said, this is what we're playing during commute traffic tomorrow on prime time. And it was the next day that he played the song. So it's just funny because I was just thinking about that when I was listening to it, is I was feeling like giving up on that song. And I'm just glad that I didn't. You know, I think it's important for the younger generation to know, like, sometimes you just got to give it a little extra push, and it might take 6 or 7 or 8 months or a year or 3 years to get it over the finish line.
Yeah,
but it's worth it.
Who inspires you as a role model on your journey?
That's an easy one. I think first and foremost, my father. My father was an elementary school teacher and taught 3rd grade for 40 years. Taught a bunch of different grades, but that was his main one. My dad was he was always there. He chose a job that specifically had very little income so that he could spend quality time with my 3 brothers and I and my mom. And I resented him for that for a long time because I felt like I couldn't connect with my dad on things that were interesting and important to me, which I've always been a business guy. Alan, that's why you and I think, really connected, is I've always seen you as a mentor and somebody that's been in that world that was always really attractive to me because my dad never brought that. He was a pension guy and he was a great teacher. He's an incredible teacher. But I always had a hard time connecting, and it wasn't until my later in my 20s. I'm 38 now, or 37 now. And it wasn't later until my early 30s, late 20s, where I really realized how much of an impact that had on my dad being present in my life. And that segues perfectly into my other mentor, which was this guy named Angel. When I was in college, I met a World War II vet that was a combat guy in World War II, fought at Battle of the Bulge, went through Normandy, super hardcore Hispanic American like I am. And gosh, the life stories that he taught me, him and I worked on a book together, which is why I originally moved to the island, was to finish the book. Not quite there yet, but we're about 2/3 of the way done. And, something he always told me was, if you want to make a difference in life, if you really, really want to make a difference, he would say this to me all the time: be the best father you can be. Be the best parent that you can be. He's like, that's what matters. That is how you make the biggest difference in this world, in this life, is be the best dad that you can be.
Wow. I relate to that for sure. Along those same lines, what advice would you give to someone who wants to make a difference but doesn't know where to start, whether it's fatherhood or whether it's business or whether it's music, etc.?
I mean, it sounds cliche, but start with what you have. There's a really cool Bible story about, and I won't get into it a whole lot, but this miracle around 3 fish and 5 loaves of bread, and that turning into feeding thousands of people. And I relate to that story a lot, because I think if we come to the table with what we have, when I wrote one of my first songs, right, that did well nationally, I used I think a $100 microphone and the oldest version of GarageBand. And I figured it out. I didn't know anything about recording. I didn't know anything about soundproofing. And I didn't know. So I think for people that are just starting out, no matter what career it is or what art path or whatever industry you're in, look at what you have and start with that. Bring your 3 loaves and your 3 fish and your 5 loaves of bread or whatever to the table. And then I think the other thing is, tying back into baseball, is be focused on incremental improvements. Every single day, I ask myself this every day: what is one thing I can do today on stage that can get me just a little bit better? Just one little step. And try to look at that over all different parts of your job title, or all different parts of your, I'm a one-stop shop here. So I have recording, I'm the marketer, I'm the salesman, write all the contracts. And I think if you could just focus on incremental improvement today, what is one thing I can put on a checklist today that makes me that much better than the people like my competition?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that those 2 things, start with what you have, focus on incremental improvements.
Let's play one more song. Tell me about the significance of Let Me Love You.
Not my favorite song. This is the first song that I wrote and recorded that I just referenced. I recorded it on a $100 USB mic. And the amazing thing is, I was a server at the time at a restaurant, and the significance is this song. So I had this table that I served, and about 2-3 days later, they came back. They were not even in my section. I was not serving them. We had a slow day. So I walked over and I continued the conversation with this couple. And he had asked me the second time they came back, so why did you move to the island? I said, I moved here to write a book and got distracted surfing. And now I've learned to play music, and I'm kind of discovering I love to try to write music. And he writes his email address down on a piece of napkin, and he says, hey, my name's David, and here's my email. If you ever finish an original song, why don't you email it to me? Well, about 6 months later, I was cleaning out a cupboard in my desk, and I come across this napkin, and I was like, wow, I just finished this first song. I should email it to him. So I did. I emailed it to him. And 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a burger shop, a little hole-in-the-wall burger shop on the west side of Kauai, and I get an email from this guy. He says, David, I never told you this, but I'm the executive producer for NBC Universal. I'm in charge of all the music for the NBA Finals and the World Series, and my team just voted on it. We'd love to use 56 seconds of your song as the theme song for the World Series, and also the San Francisco Giants Legends, which is the official documentary of the World Series that tells the story of the Giants. And I said, are you freaking kidding me? This is for real? And so that's why this song is important, is that, again, tying back into use what you have, focus on incremental improvement, and just give it all you got. Give everything that you got. This is the best at the time, this was the best song I could write with the equipment that was available to me, and I had fun doing it. And just right place, right time. Yeah. Ends up, and literally 2 weeks after I got that email, I'm on the phone with New York's entertainment lawyer from NBC Universal and a guy I hired out of Palo Alto to be my representation. And I got a full document in front of me. It says David Parsons III, San Francisco Giants, World Series. It's like a whole contract. And I'm like, still to this day, they're playing the song going into commercials at the Giants games, which is just wild to me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted you to play that song.
Yeah, here it is. Let Me Love You.
Hey, love, 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 let me love you, let me love you. Hey, love, 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 gonna love you, gonna love you. Thick and thin, seasons spin in and out again. But I will love you, I've always loved you.
All right, we're back with David Parsons. David, how can listeners get involved and support what you're doing?
You can go find me on all the streaming platforms. I'm on iTunes, Spotify, all that stuff. YouTube. I think we're trying to build our YouTube channel right now, so probably be helpful to have people tag into that. But yeah, I think just plug in and say hello. I try to answer all the DMs that I get. Just if you're on island while you're here, I'm off tour for the last 2 years with the two kiddos, under 2. I got a 7-month at this point and a 2-year-old. So life's pretty busy with that, but I play 6 nights a week. If you're on island on Kauai, hit me up on DM and I'll get back to you and give my schedule. Come say hello. Yeah.
That'd be great. What's your biggest dream or goal for the impact you'd like to make?
I think front and center right here, I think on my list is just having a permanent home for my family here on island. I think that's probably my biggest dream or goal right now because it's very expensive to live here, and to own here is difficult. So that's a very elusive dream, but we had the money for a house before COVID, and then COVID prices just spiked everything. So I think that's it. And I think the second thing would just be to continue to get better at my music. I think to continue to have opportunities to take my music to the next level in terms of production, like in Nashville. And I would really love to record there, just to hear what some of my songs would be. Because right now I'm all self-produced. But to be able to hear at that next level of polishness and to work with those kind of people, I think that would be absolutely incredible experience. So
that's been great. Thank you, David. I want to sincerely thank my guest, David Parsons III. You can find his music on all streaming platforms or visit his website at davidparsonsii.com. If you want to learn more about me and how I help others learn about leaving a legacy through passive income, visit me at alanpavlosky.com, and see you next time on the Legacy All-Stars podcast.